Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It's a beautiful day. Wimbledon finals are going on right now. One day, Wu Zhao was working as the head cook at a monastery in the Wutai Mountains of northern China, when the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjushri, suddenly appeared above the soup pot while he was cooking. Wu Zhao beat him with his spoon. Later, he said, even if Shakyamuni Buddha were to appear above the pot, I would have beaten him too. So of all the things that we human beings have in common, the one that I'm going to talk about this morning is food, the production, preparation, and consumption of food. And in talking about food, I remembered, it came to mind, the deep truth that there are many animals and humans on this planet that do not have enough food to stay healthy or even to survive. So I want to include them in my thoughts for today as well, along with a sincere wish that food insecurities in this world will continue to be addressed in a realistic way, just as our farm does in sending fresh produce to the local pantries. On a more personal level, the reason that I wanted to talk about food, first of all, is because I really like food, all kinds of food. And also because about a month or so ago, for a brief time, I returned to helping out in the kitchen here at Green Gulch Farm. It's a place where I have spent a great many years, both at this temple, at the city center, the Tassar Bakery, Green's Restaurant, and Tassahara. All of which began when I first arrived at Zen Center and was given a kitchen shift under the tutelage of a very senior student named Deborah Madison, who went on to become the head chef at Green's. She wrote an excellent vegetarian cookbook, and she retired comfortably somewhere in the Southwest. So when I was added to her crew, she clearly didn't understand just how little I knew about ovens and cooking and cleaning up after myself, which were things that my housewife mother never wanted me to learn. And yet Deborah trusted me for some reason. And so when she asked me to turn on one of the ovens, I didn't tell her that I didn't know how. Instead, I just turned the dial all the way around. And then I went back to cutting carrots. And a few minutes later, there was a loud boom. And the oven door blew open, and Deborah Madison jumped about a foot off the ground. The words that she spoke to me, although earned, I will not repeat. So since then, or perhaps because of it, I was sent to the kitchen for a good number of years. First as a crew member, and then as the summer guest cook at Tassahara twice, and then head cook down at Tassahara, and later here at Green Gulch Farm. So the head cook at a Zen temple is called the Tenzo, and is considered the first teaching job that one is given while training in Zen. Among the many essays that have been written by our Soto Zen founder, Dogen Zenji, one that we highly value in our temple training practice is called the Tenzo Kyokun, meaning instructions for the Zen cook, or perhaps more to the point, as in the title of Uchiyama Roshi's translation of this text, How to Cook Your Life. I do think that learning to cook, as I eventually did, was an extremely valuable thing for me to learn, not only about Zen practice, but even more so about my life, about how I could cook my life. And as I mentioned in a previous talk here, one of the first questions I had asked when I arrived at Zen Center is, what is this word practice that you keep talking about? Having heard a number of senior students talking and using the word practice, I said to one of them after a lecture, I know about practicing the flute and practicing volleyball, but what is it that you are practicing here at Zen Center? Anyone know? Well, the teacher replied with something like, "We practice everything, everywhere, all at once," which is the name of this recent amazing film. If you haven't seen it, I really suggest you do. So with that boundaryless explanation in mind, I hope to see for myself how being sent to the kitchen again and again could be for me, as it was for Dogen, equally at the heart of Zen practice, as is sitting here in the Zendo, as is going to the farm or the garden or the office or going to a baby shower. Meaning in my understanding that however and wherever we engage wholeheartedly in our lives as practice is what Dogen means by Zen. The Tenzo Kyokun was written over a period of years for the benefit of Dogen's own monastic community, a community that, like ours, depends on providing food and shelter for its members. This is something that's not always easy to do, not today, and certainly not in Dogen's time. There's a word that appears often in Dogen's teaching, the Japanese word shikan, which when combined with whatever word precedes it means only or just. For example, the style of meditation practice that we teach here at Zen Center is called shikan taza, just sitting, only sitting, which is what you're all doing right now. So since shikan applies to whatever we are doing wholeheartedly, the way of understanding practice runs throughout these instructions that Dogen has offered to his own head cooks. Shikan also explains why Wuzo hit Manjushri with his spoon. Wuju was not in the mood for a Dharma talk at that time, even from the Bodhisattva of wisdom. He was wholeheartedly focused on making a nourishing pot of soup for the hungry community. I think what makes this story about cooking feel so important to us, as it was for Dogen, has to do with its focus on our everyday life activities, the actual world in which we care for our families, for our daily chores, and where we begin to understand how doing what we do wholeheartedly is at the center of the Buddha's awakening experience as well. In fact, wholehearted sitting, shikantaza, would be quite meaningless. In my view, if it only didn't have any influence on the rest of our day, it would have no value. So at the beginning of Dogen's Tenzo Kyokun, one of his most important practical essays, he even writes that I shall now take up the work of the Tenzo, covering a period of one complete day. One complete day sounds somewhat limited. But then as I thought about that, one complete day is about all that the eye of my practice can reach. I really don't remember much about yesterday, and I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. But today, at least right now, I am completely intimate with the activity that I am doing. It would be hard to miss. In fact, I am nothing other than the activity that I am doing right now with the support of all of you. Just this is it. No other it in sight. This is shikan. So having just said that, it feels a little bit funny to talk about cooking when I'm not cooking. But given that the underlying principle is the same, that just this is it, whether cooking or not, I think it's okay for me to go on talking about the work of the Tenzo. Just talking. Dogen is very specific in his instructions to the cook, specific instructions being necessary, as all of you know who are experienced cooks. When I told a senior student many years back how terribly nervous I was being a guest cook at Tassajara, she said to me, "Oh, don't worry, just follow the recipes." And she was right, but to a point. And the point was that cooking itself does the actual teaching. such as the smell of burnt cookies, or the sound of the pressure cooker about to blow, and the sight of breaking glass falling onto my stir fry. These are just a few of the lessons that cooking has taught to me. Dogen begins his essay by telling the cook to order enough rice and vegetables for the morning and noon meals. And then, quoting the Zen master Renyon, he says, use the property and possessions of the community as carefully as if they were your own eyes. I can remember reading that line while I was in the kitchen and thinking that my body responded to this teaching, particularly my eyes, you know. And what could be more important or more intimate than taking care of these everyday things like rice and vegetables as carefully as I care for my own eyes? And yet I had never thought about how I care for my eyes or my fingers or my toes. I just do, you know, I really do. Especially in the kitchen, where huge pots of water are boiling and knives are unintentionally flailing around. It's not so difficult hurting yourself in the kitchen. What's difficult is not hurting yourself in the kitchen. I was once carrying a tray of pizzas in a hot tray of pizzas out of the oven into the courtyard at Tassajara. And as I went out the door, these two young kids came running at me. I had no choice but to lift the tray onto my forearms. I can remember hearing the sound and feeling the sensation just about at the same time. I still have these tattoos, one on either side from that occasion. And a reminder of the noble, albeit mostly involuntary gesture to protect those children. So there are a great many stories that we could all share about kitchen mishaps, but I think the best story, as far as I can tell, is that in over 50 years of Zen Center kitchen practice, no one has been seriously injured. And I hope that such faithful kitchen practice will continue here forever. Dogen then tells the Tenzo to handle all the food they receive with respect, as if we were giving a meal to the emperor. And what he means, I think what he really means, is not only to treat food, but all the things that come into our hands with that same degree of respect, which, from my point of view, is the entire point of Zen training. In a recent Thursday night class on the first chapter in the Transmission of Light, I retold a story from Reb's book, Being Upright, about Lord Sendai and the tea bowl, which illustrates this principle of showing our utmost respect for both people and objects, even when the objects are broken. So in this story, there are three main characters. There is Lord Sendai, who represents the Buddha. There's a monk named Tetsugu, a sincere practitioner who is making tea for his noble guest, and a monk named Choan, who has come to join them for tea. Choan represents the non-dual reality on which our Zen practice is precariously balanced. A reality in the sutras is characterized by selflessness, wishlessness, and emptiness of any separate existence. The reality in which there is nothing outside of ourself to wish for, and no one inside of ourself to make a wish. So here's the story. During the Tokugawa era in Japan, a monk named Tetsugu was serving tea to Lord Sendai when his Dharma brother Choan dropped by the tea room. Lord Sendai invited Choan to join them for tea. Tetsugu chose an especially precious antique tea bowl that Lord Sendai had given him and put it down on the tatami mat to make tea. In the midst of appreciating the great beauty of the tea bowl, Choan suddenly reached out with his staff and smashed the tea bowl. "Now look at the authentic tea bowl that exists before birth," said Choan. Tetsugu turned pale and nearly fainted. But Lord Sendai was able to stay present, and he said to Tetsugu, "I gave you that tea bowl, but I would like you to give it back to me now. And before you give it back, please have it glued together and have a box made for it. On the cover of the box, I ask that you write the name of the bowl, which I now give as the authentic tea bowl before birth, which I will reverently pass on to my descendants. So it's from within Lord Sendai's understanding of the intimacy between the ultimate truth, that the teacup is already broken, and the relative truth, which allows us to take care of such precious transient things, that the Bodhisattva vow is born. The vow to take care of these precious transient things, including our own eyes, to the end of our days. So as you may know, the driving question that had sent the young monk Dogen off to studying in China in the first place was the question of why we humans need to practice, if according to the Buddha's own teaching, we are already endowed with Buddha nature, already Buddha, as they say. One of the primary insights that Dogen Zenji had in response to this question was not an answer to why we should practice, but more to the point, how we should practice, meaning how should we live, not why. That one's too late. Dogen's awakening transformed his teaching into both profound abstract reasoning, as well as concrete practical instructions, such as what to do with our hands, our head, our torso, our legs, and our feet. Without a doubt, working in the kitchen is a very good place to put the question, how, to the test. For example, from Dogen's essay, when washing the rice, remove any sand that you find. In doing so, don't lose 1 grain of rice. How? When you look at the rice, see the sand at the same time. When you look at the sand, see also the rice. Examine both carefully. If you do that, the meal will come out naturally altogether. So this instruction about the rice and the sand gave Dogen an opportunity to tell another story about a time that our Chinese Zen ancestor Dongshan was in a Dharma conversation with the Tenzo of his own temple, a monk named Zheng Feng. One day, Zheng Feng was washing the rice. Dongshan happened to pass by and asked, "Do you wash the sand and pick out the rice, or wash the rice and pick out the sand?" Sand and rice, according to one commentary, represent right views and wrong views, or the ultimate truth and the relative truth. Shui Feng replied, "I wash and throw away both the sand and the rice." "Then what on earth do the residents eat?" Dongshan pressed him. In reply, Shui Feng knocked over the bucket of rice. On seeing that, Dongshan said, "The day will come when you will practice under another master." So what Dongshan is telling the Tenzo is that his expression of understanding is okay, but like Choan, who smashed the precious tea bowl, too rough. In other words, Shui Feng is not behaving with respect for all things, which is at the very heart of Dongshan's own understanding of Zen. And as it turned out, Shui Feng did go on to study with the Zen master, Deshan, who is in the lineage of Rinzai Zen, a school of Zen notable for the kind of dramatic gestures that Shui Feng had made as Tenzo. Along with knocking over cooking pots and breaking tea bowls, Rinzai masters, as far as my knowledge goes, which isn't very far, still employ a variety of vigorous teaching methods, such as shouting and hitting and mastering martial arts like archery and kung fu. Such Zen art forms, along with the tea ceremony and flower arranging and calligraphy, had been highly developed among the samurai class of medieval Japan. Soto Zen, on the other hand, the Zen of Dongshan, Dogen, and Suzuki Roshi, has been characterized as more gentle and rustic in spirit. They're in the saying that Rinzai for the shogun and Soto for the farmers, which tells us something about how we ended up on a farm here in California. And yet, whichever of the Zen traditional schools you find yourself drawn to, once you have been sent to the kitchen, Dogen's primary admonishment is the same. The way-seeking mind of the Tenzo is actualized by rolling up your sleeves. A saying that echoes in a famous Zen statement by another of our early ancestors, Baizhang Weihai, who is credited with founding the first independent Zen monastery in China, a monastery that included periods of work and farming, activities not normally permitted for Buddhist monastics of his day. Along with a number of rules for establishing a Zen monastery, Baizhang was said to have declared to his monks, "A day of no work is a day of no food." A statement I have heard cited as part of the formation of our own Zen Center monastic training requirements. Some of the other regulations that Dogen cites in his instructions to the head cook are still being followed in our very own kitchens. For example, number 1, taking care to cover the pots of food lest a mouse or a rat should fall in. Number 2, under no circumstances allowing anyone who happens to be drifting through the kitchen to poke their fingers into the food or to look into the pot. Number 3, put the utensils that naturally go on a high shelf, and those that would be more stable on a low shelf, on a low shelf. 4, keep your mind on your work and do not throw things around carelessly. Number 5, clean everything thoroughly of all dirt and insects. Number 6, keep your eyes open, not allowing even one grain of rice to be lost. Wash the rice thoroughly, put it in a pot, light the fire, and cook it. There's an old saying that goes, see the pot as your own head and see the water as your lifeblood. And then for the Tenzo, number 7, when you go to your room, close your eyes and count the number of monks to be fed. Don't forget the elder priests or those living in single rooms, in the infirmary, or the newly arrived. But perhaps the most important instruction of them all, number 8, handle even a single leaf of a green in such a way that it manifests the body of the Buddha. This in turn allows the Buddha to manifest through a single leaf of green. So when I read through Dogen's instructions to the Tenzo, I find myself transported back to those many years that I spent in Zen Center kitchens. Many years of ordering food, saving scraps for the compost piles, cleaning the pots and the cooking utensils, calculating the number of people likely to show up for a meal, serving the food, and planning out what needs to be done for the start of the next day. So when I became a mother at the age of 45, I had already been Tenzo for a number of years, and somehow the multiple tasks of childcare were literally baked into my bones. I was pretty well trained by kitchen practice to warm up the food, but not too warm, to clean up after myself, to explain things in accordance with the listener's capacity to understand, and especially to keep my mind on the work, such as not forgetting where I last saw my child. In other words, as Dogen says to the Tenzo, in your day-to-day life, do not forget these things, even for a moment. He also says that if the Tenzo or the parent, the guest manager, or the director, or the farmer, or the gardener, throw their energy into the work of the day, then both the activity and the method will naturally nurture the seeds of the Buddha Dharma. Just taking care of the unique functions within each of our Dharma positions enables all the residents of our communities to carry on their practice in the most harmonious way. Then on the other hand, as Dogen laments, when we fail to take care of things in a wholehearted, respectful, and considerate manner, as in the case of caring for our food, then we eat the same way as animals eat, with no concern for how the food is made or how it comes to us. So there's a chant that we recite before each meal, including in our homes, that helps us to remember what our founding teacher considered primary in the daily practice of the Buddha way. We venerate the three treasures, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and give thanks for this food, the work of many people, and the suffering of other forms of life. There's really no choice for us living beings unless we manage to manufacture our own food, as plants do, than to eat other living beings. Acknowledging the taking of life through wholehearted respect and care for what we have taken is perhaps the best we can do to remain conscious of the hidden costs of a healthy vegetarian diet. So the last section of the Tenzo Kyokun that I'm going to share with you this morning is near the end, where Dogen talks about the mind of the way. He says, in reflecting on those who have labored as Tenzo with an attitude of practicing the way, we see that in every case, the manner in which they carried out their work coincided exactly with the virtues of their character. Daigui was enlightened when serving as Tenzo under Baizhang. The story of Dongshan's 3 pounds of sesame took place when he was Tenzo. Is there anything of greater value than realization of what the way is? Is there any time more precious than the time of realizing the way? And then he says that the duties of the offices of the Tenzo, the director, the Ino, and so on, are the same now as they were 100 years ago. For us, 800 years ago. If the activities and functions have not changed, how can we today fail to actualize their marvelous nature the same as those of ancient times did? In striving to maintain the spirit of the way, there are 3 minds to carefully consider. These 3 minds are written on round wooden tablets, and each of them is placed on our kitchen altars here at Zen Center. You can see them here in Gulch kitchen altar, little round wooden plaques. The first one says joyful mind, characterized by buoyancy and gratitude. Gratitude, Dogen says, for having been born into the world where we are capable of using our body freely to offer food to the 3 treasures, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The second is grandmotherly mind, as Suzuki Roshi called it, the mind of a parent. And with this mind, we care for all life as a parent cares for their only child. It is the grandmotherly mind that handles water, rice, and everything else with the affection and concern of a parent raising a child. The third is magnanimous mind, a mind like a mountain, stable and impartial, a mind like the ocean, tolerant in its views with the broadest possible perspective, refusing to take sides. Magnanimous mind does not get carried away by the sounds of spring, nor become heavy-hearted on seeing the colors of fall. Without magnanimous mind, Dongshan would not have responded to the question of what the Buddha is by his now famous act of picking up a bag of sesame seeds. He ends the Tenzo Kyokun saying, whether you are the head of a temple, a senior monk or other officer, or simply an ordinary monk, do not forget the attitude behind living out your life with joy, having the deep concern of a parent for their child, and carrying out all of your activities magnanimously. His essay is signed at the bottom, written by Dogen in the spring of 1237 at Ko-sho-ji, for followers of the way in succeeding generations. So I offer a deep bow of gratitude to our far-sighted ancestor. And I wonder if there are any questions from all of you about this offering this morning. And I know our Eno will be coming around the microphone.
Would you choose the questions again?
Well, I'll need to see hands. Can everyone raise their hand? Everyone. Okay, go ahead, pick anybody. Okay, anyone who'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Yes, please.
Thank you for the teaching. Thank you for the teaching this morning.
You're welcome.
My daughter recently has been cooking
and
burning the food.
Yeah.
And A little closer. Okay. And it reminds me of how can I communicate with her about being mindful and attending to the food.
Yeah. So what is your name? Darren. So Darren asked about his daughter who's just learning how to cook, and how can he help her with the burning and the other things that apparently she's doing as she's cooking. Well, that's what I went through, and I had people nearby. Maybe if you're with her, in the kitchen and helping her to kind of critique how she's doing and help her with the timing on whatever's in the oven and so on. That's the best way, is the mentoring that both I received and I think your daughter would receive from you, if that's something you can spend time doing. There's also cooking classes, which I sent my daughter to.
You mentioned briefly that people and animals are different in their interaction with food, because animals, did I understand correctly, don't think about where the food comes from? I kind of question that, or what did you mean by that?
Well, I don't know that they think at all. I mean, I wonder, they might be just delighted to see a mouse run by. It's sort of like like a frog. Suzuki Roshi really liked frogs, he said, because they just sit there until the fly comes, and then. So I'm not sure they're planning on flies coming, or how they're going to go about. They don't have fishing nets and fishing hooks and so on and so forth. We're kind of clever primates, apparently, to a point. So we have planned things out about this thing we call the future, of how to get food. In fact, it's because we figured out food that there's so many of us, too many. We have taken over from all the other species, and we're eating it all very quickly. So that's what I meant.
I guess I was thinking about that frog, because I've always thought that's my goal, is to be more like that frog.
Yeah, well, how would that do for lunch? No, if you just wait for something to come to you, that might be it'd be an interesting experiment. People might take pity on you and bring you something. Well, the monks did that. They held their bowls, right? They went from village to village. They just allowed people to offer food for and thanks for their practice. So I think that's a perfectly wonderful way to live, too. Right.
Since we're on the topic of animals, I've often seen the bobcat playing in the garden, and I was delighted and curious by its joyful demeanor in hopping around. I was from a distance, but I've seen it 3 times in the garden, went just hiking, and it sparked my curiosity on your viewpoint of the significance of animals in living harmoniously together. I've also seen a great horned owl here that had huge eyes and could turn its head like 180 degrees. And it just seems like such a peaceful place to be integrated with animals. And I just was curious on your personal viewpoint of animals in Soto Zen Buddhism.
Okay. That's the kitchen leaving, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, well, we're very lucky to live in a place that animals still feel, they don't feel exactly safe, because except for that bobcat who seems to have turned himself into a pet, that most of the animals will scurry away, like the little baby quail. Have you seen the baby quail? Just a few weeks ago, there's little puffballs, and now they're getting quite plump and they can fly. So, they are, they're not our pets, and they really do have their own way of living here in the valley. But, we have fences. So we fence out the deer. We don't let them go into the fields. And we have a kind of queasy relationship with plowing, with the tractor, and the various things that we do, which is one reason traditionally monks didn't do that kind of thing. They didn't do things that might harm the little creatures living in the soil. So we're in this, like I was saying, being grateful for the offering of the food and also acknowledging the suffering of others, other forms of life, is really essential to our effort to live harmoniously with other species, and we don't let the rats in the kitchen, or in my house. And I had a cat that would take care of that. And it's ambivalent, how do I feel about the cat walking across so proudly with the rat in his mouth? It's hard, but that's part of the burden that we all bear of being alive, that we are taking life to live. Can we minimize that harm? I think that's maybe the best thing I've seen us do, try to minimize harm to other creatures. Oh, thanks for asking.
This one isn't so much about cooking, but rather like eating food. I think I struggle sometimes to just mindlessly eat the food and without much like thought or appreciation into it. And I was wondering if you had any advice on something simple that I could keep in mind to do better with that.
Yeah. I like that little chant that we do at the beginning of meals. I do that at home before eating. And it really kind of centers me back into, oh yeah, that's right. And I'm doing this right now, and I like having the food arranged in a nice way on my plate, and the silverware. So taking some conscious effort to set the space where you're eating. And then also I think I used to just put it in my mouth and chew and talk and all that before I started practicing here. And then I found it so much more joyful and satisfying to notice what I was eating and to chew it, chew each bite. Suzuki Roshi talks about that quite a lot. Chewing the brown rice, really chewing it, getting all that flavor out before you swallow. Just slow it down. If you sit up straight while you're eating, and if you're bent over your plate, it's kind of tempting to just kind of quickly get through it. But the more you use your own posture and your own relationship to what's there in front of you and appreciation for the taste, the flavors of the food, I think some of those practices you can just begin to cultivate a different relationship with what you're eating, which I think is kind of neglected for a lot of us. So that's what I do. What I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You mentioned that learning to cook food helped you with learning to cook your life.
Yeah.
What was the biggest lesson you learned cooking food that has helped you
Yeah.
in your life?
The question is, what was the biggest lesson I learned cooking food? So this was our online. We have a little online crowd right here too. That's right there. This magic eye.
Well, what was the biggest lesson cooking food that helped you to cook your life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Biggest lesson cooking food that helped me to learn to cook how to cook my life. What's going to come to mind? Let's see. There's so many. I was in the kitchen a long time. I think the first one that comes to mind now is the smell of the cookies. That I actually can tell when the cookies are done if I'm paying attention to the smell. And I didn't know that. I thought you had to have a timer and you had to, do this kind of intellectual process. But to let your senses come to life, to really listen for the sounds of something, or smelling when the onions are done. There's so many signals. The food is talking all the time. And as you're working with the spice and tasting, oh, yeah, that's about a little more salt, a little more this and that. So it seemed like just bringing more and more awareness to the details of my activities throughout the day. And washing dishes, that used to just be, oh, okay, wash the dishes. That's not much fun. what's not fun, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it's really a practice if I take the care with the dishes that I might take in the tea room with the tea bowl and with taking care of those utensils, just cleaning them and putting them in the rack and then putting them away later. That all of those things are really practices that you can put into your life. And it's for your benefit. It enlivens your relationship with objects when you care for them in that way. When you put two hands on something you're carrying. There was a new student here recently, and someone asked them to take the offering tray, which has little tiny food. We have this offering tray that has these little bowls of food that we offer to the Buddha. And so the Tenzo puts little samples of each thing that the monks are eating into this offering tray. So this person was holding the tray in one hand and going to open the door. And my alarms went off, not about the person, but about that gesture. I was like, ooh, put that tray down. Now open the door. Now pick up the tray and walk through the door. So it's just some part of our training is, using both hands. Somehow you don't have to be in a hurry. Things that you're doing, you can take the time to actually experience what you're doing in the day. And that applies to everything. All the tools that we use, whatever you're doing, putting your tools away when you're done, leaving the space cleared. I don't think we got much of that training. Maybe some of you did, but that wasn't part of my upbringing. That stuff was going on behind the scenes, mostly by my mother. So I feel part of my karma in having so many kitchen jobs at Zen Center was because I wasn't helpful to my mother. I thought, this is payback. I had a lot of years I could have been a lot more useful in my home. So I don't resent doing all these chores now. Really do feel like it's my dues.
Thank you.
You're
That's a good
welcome.
answer.
You're
Thank you.
There's one in front. Hello, and there's one. Okay, I see you in the back. I get a hand here in front first. What time do we got? Oh,
Hi,
good morning.
good morning.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you for
know.
your
I
talk.
even recognized you with your mask.
I guess one of the things that came up for me, well, two things. One is I feel like I failed horribly to show my kids like a gratitude for cooking. I feel like I spent years just feeling exhausted and resentful for having to cook and wash dishes. And then my second, and now they're teenagers, and I feel like, okay, it's a little too late. And then my second, that's not really a question, it's just a comment, but I worked really hard to raise my sons to understand the importance of organics and planet, and maybe too dogmatically, sort of adamantly trying to teach them about non-GMOs and organic and grass-fed, if you're going to eat meat, blah blah blah. And they're now teenagers, and they're away at school, and they're learning to cook, and I'm excited and thrilled that they're learning to cook, but they're sharing with me the things that they're cooking, and it's horrifying me, cup of noodles, ramen, and stuff filled with, chemicals, and it's killing me. And like everybody's telling me, like, you just have to let go. And I'm grappling with, like, how do I like let go and trust, and did anything that it feels like, they want to do the exact opposite of what I taught them. They want to get this, they're getting steak like from Walmart, and it's just killing me. So I guess my question is, how does one deal with that?
About being killed. If you see the Buddha, kill the Buddha. Yeah, well, that's a mother's lament. I mean, I could say that. Yeah, I think any mothers not say that, that rebellious they are, and how they need to find their own way. And and then at some point, I'm always delighted when my daughter does something that I think is a good idea. It's like, well, that's a good idea. Why don't you do more of that? So, and I know she's 30 years old. She is not my property, and she has her life to to do in the way she chooses. And I respect that. And you did your best. I did my best. And I have actually a great faith in the goodness of that person that was there already before I got my hands on her. You know, she was already perfect. You know, when I first met her, there she was. So I think it's really your practice. It's your calling on. It's like, how do I stop grasping things that really and probably would be creating a kind of, I don't know what for your kids. It's like, oh, come on, mom. Come on, mom. Pull back a little bit. You just nod and go, oh, really? Huh. Cup of noodles, huh? Been a long time since I'd had a cup of noodles. So I don't know. The lightness of being, how to let things go that really you have no control over. It's probably the main reason. Is there there's another hand back there, I think. Or,
Hi. Oh, is this okay? Hello. Like that. How's that? Why am I not? Is that you can hear me now? Okay.
keep trying.
I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's better. Okay. My question has to do with the issue of timing, specifically related to the senses. So you were speaking about like cooking, and you could sort of, through your sense of smell or taste or whatever, you can tell when something is ready or finished. And I'm wondering if you could extend this sort of understanding of like, how does that relate to other arenas of life? This like timing through the senses, and perhaps through, I don't know, like intuition or some sort of deep-seated sense of like when to act and stop and do and not do, and this operating through timing and time in general. Like, what is that? I don't know. But then the senses, like this. So I'm rambling. But my question is like, can you connect your experience of being a body that has a sensory experience with also moving through time? How do you make sense of that? And then also food.
Do you mind if I start by telling you my only joke?
No, I would love that.
Okay.
I would love that so much.
So ask me how I became the world's most famous actress.
You want me to ask you that? How did you become the world's
Timing.
It's a good joke.
That's not a joke. Yeah, well, that's really at the heart of the question, isn't it? Like, how do we use our senses? One of our senses in the Buddha Dharma is our consciousness that's aware of thoughts. So we only have 6 consciousnesses according to Buddhist teaching. We have our 5 senses, which are aware of sounds and sights and odors and textures and whatever I left out, smell. Yeah. So we have the 5 senses, and then we have the 6th sense consciousness, which is aware of thinking. That's the one that takes over driving the car. And we kind of miss out on these other 5. You know, they get kind of backseated sometimes because we're so busy thinking. Oh, did you see that? Did you see that mountain we just drove by? Oh no, I missed it. So, we really want to bring our senses to life, but not to disparage our thinking, but to recognize that it's really often too loud and wrong and judgmental and doing all kinds of stuff that's not in our control, but we tend to obey some of our thinking. So a lot of what I have felt has been the gift of practice for me is slowing down, way down, to a degree I never could have imagined I would be willing to do, like sitting zazen. How about 40 minutes of just sitting still? I like to tell the story of this little group of kids who was here from one of the local schools. And I asked them while they were sitting on the floor here, and I said, okay, I'm going to have you all sit still for about 5 minutes. That's all, which is a very long time, as I'm sure you all know. And then I'll ring a bell and ask you how that was. So most of them were squirming and, not so comfortable. I think they were junior high, except this one little boy who was very still. And so I asked them how it was, and some of them said that was hard. But he said, no one has ever asked me not to do anything before. It was wonderful. Expect to see him back here in a year. So, not to do anything is really something. That is such a gift. And that's what Zen is. That's what Buddhism is. The Buddha sat still while his mind was going nuts and scaring him with all kinds of fears of dying and sickness and stuff, getting old. He was terrified. And that's why he ran away from the palace. He was afraid of the same things that we all know are true: old age, sickness, and death. So, confronting the facts of life is helpful if you're just sitting quietly and allowing these things to come into your consciousness, watch them change colors and move away, and something else comes. And, little by little, we can cultivate patience for our lives and with things that come, especially when they're difficult. When friends are sick or elders are dying, we can begin to learn how to just sit still and be there. My student of mine who's here right now studying with me is learning to be a chaplain. And the same thing is taught to chaplains as we teach in Zen. Just be present. You don't have to do anything when you go in the room. Don't make up something that you're going to do to this poor person, change their feelings or make them happy or whatever. Just sit there and allow them to be who they are and to ask you if they need something. And so, this is really fundamental training that I think probably our species knew, when we were just out there in the woods. But I think we've forgotten a lot of what we know. I would say slowing down, I would start with that. How you walk, how you move around space, how you pick things up and set them down. And then you can let me know how that goes.
Yeah, I just wonder, this is kind of, when you slow down, does time slow down, or does your, do you know what I mean? Is time slowing down, or are you slowing down, or is both happening? I could.
That's a
whatever.
metaphysical question. Well, they've done a study of that, actually. They had some people climb up this tower. And there was a big, like a mattress or something at the bottom, and fall backwards with holding a stopwatch. And they were trying to figure out if time actually changed or if their sense of time changed, right? And what they discovered is that your sense of time changes because when you're falling backwards, you are trying to find something to get a hold of so that you don't fall. So time becomes very intimate and detailed. You're noticing every texture on the wall and, because you're looking for a way out of here. So depending on what you're doing, waiting to come in here, there was 3 minutes left, before I was going to walk in the door here. And that was the longest period of time I've spent in this week. The second hand is just going, doing, I thought, oh my God. Poor Lauren. Where's Lauren? Poor Lauren. Wasn't it long, that 3 minutes? Yeah, really long. So it depends on what you're doing. That time is not, it's not the clock, actually. Yeah, you're welcome. Speaking of time, we have a little bit left. Yes, behind you there, Valerian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please further explain the meaning of I wash rice and I wash the sand and I throw them both away?
Jerry, would you help me with that one? That's what he's doing right now. He's throwing them both away. He's completely in a non-dual state. Just like everyone else. So yeah, if it's this commentary, which may or may not be accurate, is that it's about ultimate truth and relative truth, or about right and wrong. I throw them both away. I hold no views for or against anything. Not for the sand, not for the rice. Throw them both away. And then what does Dongshan say? Well, what are the monks going to eat if you throw them both away? So then we're back to the relative truth, the world where we have relationships to things and where we have people to feed and where we have to take care of these precious things. So this is the dance that goes on, and you'll hear it over and over again if you go to Buddhist talks, between the ultimate truth, non-dual, everything's fine just the way it is, and the relative truth, there's a need for a little improvement. So those are called the two truths. And as the Dalai Lama said, if you want to, your beginning student of Dharma ought to understand the two truths. Or it's very hard to understand what's going on in these talks if you don't have some working sense of what those two truths are. So you might just check it out. Actually, you can just go to Wikipedia and they've got this whole thing that's really well done. I asked the AI thing, chat, can you give me a description? It was really good. It took me years to write what they wrote in. So it's all there. You just have to push the right buttons. And actually, I also asked the AI, I gave him my name, and I said, I'm not the abbess anymore, but I said, the abbess of Green Gulch Farm, who is Fu Schroeder, the abbess of Green Gulch Farm? And it said some accurate things. And then it said, she's a student of Maizumi Roshi, is also skilled in Sanskrit and Korean, and studied Tai Chi. And I mean, it was just this shakuhachi, and it's just all, everything Zen thing that the AI could come up with is on my biography now. So I'm going to use that instead of my boring one, which has no texture whatsoever. So I went to Zen Center and she left. Anyway, so yeah, the two truths. What are you doing, Valerian?
I'm watching you.
As always. So he's got his eye on me. He wished that I would break my leg before I came in here. Said, break a leg. Yes.
Rational economics. So I'm asking about the Dharma teaching and what it can teach us about doing no harm while eating, consuming, being alive, and some kind of rational economics that we can feed the world. Growing up as a kid, I would visit my family in the countryside and talk to the farmers, and they're clearing massive amounts of land, and at the same time saying we're feeding the world. They're growing wheat and exporting it from Australia across the world. And here at Green Gulch, with the farm and your intimate connection with the land and the food, I wonder what the Dharma teaches about both sustaining the Dharma and the Dharma community, and also the planet, humanity, all life on Earth, with limited resources. So is it something that just seems to come naturally? You just cook, and it just kind of manifests itself out of some heart-centered practice, or there's this tension between presence and this concept of like rational thinking and rational economics, like providing for the entire planet. So I wonder, I'm really curious about what the Dharma can teach about that and our responsibility for all things, particularly in a climate crisis, where I don't know what's going to happen to our food resources in the next 50 years.
I think we do know. Yeah, I was driving to Southern California recently, and there are all of these dead trees that have been cut down because they can't afford the water to grow the almonds, which are exported to China. So, we have these systems, and then there's big signs saying farmers grow food. But actually, the reality is, commerce has really taken up the extremes of what is happening. It's not individual practice. It's like corporate practice. It's how do you control that? Who's home? Anybody home? Anybody here a corporation? How do we engage with that massive identity that doesn't depend on an individual for doing its thing? Just like countries that just keep kind of churning. So, this is not new in world history. We're just, so advanced, such advanced technique. I would say I think there needs to be elevated consciousness among humans. It does require us as individuals to grow up, to take the responsibility for the whole, that the parenting or stewardship. I've recently, our retirement place up in Healdsburg, California, which Zen Center has kind of spearheaded the project, and which is where I and others will go to retire, has a number of other people living there who are retiring with us. Just had a big meeting up there the other day. There's about 300 people or something going to be living together in a Zen-inspired senior living. But also, the other partner we have is the Quakers. So I started searching about, looking into the Quakers and their principles, which I found very encouraging. Something called spices. Live simply so others can simply live. That's a value, peaceful, integrity, community, equity, and stewardship. So I just said, okay, I'll take that. That's good. I'm going to take whatever the Quakers have been doing for hundreds and hundreds of years, spearheading in the West, the idea of peace, nonviolence, and so on. And I think the Buddhists and the Quakers are very good pairing. And I'm really thrilled, actually, to be having the influence of the Quaker practice and our Zen practice coming together in this new little community that's forming up in Healdsburg, which you're all welcome to visit because we'll have a Zendo there and probably talks and so on. So I think teaching is probably, the Buddha taught. That's what he did. He basically talked to people about how to think about these problems. So we're all teachers. We all have the responsibility of teaching our children, teaching our friends, and certainly learning for ourselves. What is simply living so that others can simply live? How do we do that? That's a value that we hold here, as best we can. It's not perfect, but we try to keep things fairly simple. And we were very early on with organic growing and baking the organic flour. Even though it was so expensive, we still baked with organic flour. So whatever you can model in your own world of how a better way to live, I think that's gives a little hope to the people in your life. And the more influence you have, the more you can do that. So if you have a position where you have influence, then even more people can, begin to understand, like teachers, for example. And so, yeah. It's hot out there. Record heat, right? We all know, we're reading the news. Record heat, record flooding. Wasn't climate change something that was going to happen in about 100 years? Do you remember that? The predictions, Well, I guess not. I guess it's right now. So I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. And it's painful. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming and wish you well.